I never thought I'd end up here, staring at these pale green walls that smell of disinfectant and forgotten dreams. The Willowbrook Nursing Home, they call it. Such a pretty name for a place where children abandon their parents. My name is Harold Whitman, and I'm 78 years old. 2 weeks ago, I was living in the house I built with my own hands. Today, I'm sitting in a wheelchair by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass, and I can't help but smile. You see, everyone thinks I'm the victim in this story. Poor old Harold, they whisper. His children dumped him here like yesterday's newspaper, but they don't know what I know. They don't understand that sometimes the most powerful thing an old man can do is exactly what everyone expects him not to do. Let me tell you how it really happened. It was a Tuesday morning in September when my daughter Margaret and my son David came to visit. I should have known something was wrong by the way they sat on the edge of my sofa, their backs straight, their faces wearing those careful expressions people use when they're about to deliver bad news. "Dad!" Margaret began, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she'd perfected over the years. "We need to talk about your living situation." I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one I'd reupholstered myself 3 times over the past 40 years. The morning light was streaming through the windows of the living room, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air like tiny spirits. This house had been my sanctuary for 5 decades. Every board, every nail, every coat of paint had been applied by these weathered hands. "What about my living situation?" I asked, though I already knew where this conversation was heading. David cleared his throat. He was 45 now, wearing one of those expensive suits that cost more than most people make in a month. "Dad, you're not getting any younger. Last month you fell in the garden. Mrs. Peterson next door said she saw you wandering around the yard at 3 in the morning. "I was checking on my tomatoes," I said quietly. "The rabbits have been getting into them." Margaret leaned forward, her perfectly manicured hands clasped together. "Dad, you're becoming confused. You left the stove on all night last week. You could have burned the house down." I looked at my daughter, this woman who used to climb into my lap when she was 4 years old, begging me to read her stories about brave princesses and kind-hearted dragons. Now she was 43, with silver threads in her blonde hair and worry lines around her eyes that made her look older than her years. "I'm not confused," I said. "I turned the stove off. I always turn the stove off." But they weren't listening. They'd already made their decision. They talked about safety and proper care, and how they worried about me living alone in such a big house. They used words like quality of life and professional supervision and the right thing to do. What they didn't say, but what hung in the air between us like smoke, was that the house was worth over $800,000. The neighborhood had gentrified over the years, and my modest 2-story home with its wraparound porch and mature oak trees had become prime real estate. "We've already looked at several facilities," David said, pulling out a glossy brochure. "Willowbrook is one of the finest nursing homes in the state. They have activities, medical staff on site, and you'll have other people your age to socialize with." I took the brochure with trembling hands, not because I was old and feeble, but because I was angry at the assumption that I couldn't take care of myself, angry at the way they talked about me as if I weren't sitting right there, angry at the realization that my own children saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between them and their inheritance. "What about the house?" I asked. Margaret and David exchanged a look. "Well," Margaret said carefully, "obviously we'll need to sell it. The proceeds will help pay for your care at Willowbrook." I nodded slowly, as if I were considering this generous offer. "I see. Dad," David said, his voice softening slightly, "I know this is hard, but we're doing this because we love you. We want what's best for you. Love. Such a complicated word. I wondered if they remembered the nights I stayed up with them when they had fevers, reading stories until my voice was hoarse. I wondered if they remembered the baseball games I attended, the school plays I applauded, The graduations I celebrated with tears in my eyes. I wondered if they remembered the sacrifices their mother and I made so they could have the opportunities we never had. But I didn't say any of this. Instead, I folded the brochure and placed it on the coffee table. "When?" I asked. "We can have the paperwork ready by next week," David said. "And we've already put a deposit down at Willowbrook." Already. They'd already made the arrangements, already decided my fate, already counted the money they'd make from selling my home. "I understand," I said. Over the next few days, I watched as they came and went, sorting through my belongings like vultures picking at carrion. They kept the things they wanted, my father's pocket watch, my mother's china set, the antique desk I'd inherited from my grandfather. Everything else was marked for donation or disposal. I sat in my chair, pretending to be the doddering old man they expected me to be. I watched Margaret bag up my clothes, keeping only enough for a few changes. I watched David box up my books, muttering about how I wouldn't need so many in the nursing home. I watched them divide up my life like it was a garage sale, but what they didn't know was that I'd been planning too. 3 days before they were scheduled to move me to Willowbrook, I called a taxi and asked the driver to take me to the office of Jonathan Mills, the lawyer who'd handled my will and estate planning for the past 20 years. Jonathan was a good man, honest and straightforward, and he'd been a friend to my late wife Eleanor during her final illness. "Harold," he said when I walked into his office, "I wasn't expecting to see you today. Jonathan, I need to make some changes to my will. And I need to do it quickly." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "What kind of changes?" I sat down and pulled out the deed to my house. "I want to sell the house, but not to whoever offers the most money. I want to choose the buyer." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "That's unusual, but certainly within your rights as the homeowner. May I ask why?" I told him about Margaret and David's plan to put me in the nursing home. I told him about their assumptions about my mental state, their eagerness to liquidate my assets. I told him about the way they'd looked at me like I was already dead. "I see," Jonathan said quietly. "And you want to sell the house to someone specific?" "Yes. There's a woman named Sarah Chen who works at the grocery store where I shop. She's been saving for years to buy a house for herself and her 8-year-old daughter. She told me once that she's been looking at houses in the neighborhood, but everything's too expensive. She's a good person, Jonathan. She treats me with respect. She remembers my name. She asks about my garden." Jonathan nodded. "And the price?" "Fair market value, not a penny less, but I want the sale to go through immediately. I want the papers signed and the deed transferred before my children can interfere." "Harold, are you sure about this? Your children might contest the sale if they believe you're not mentally competent." I looked at him steadily. "Jonathan, do I seem mentally incompetent to you?" He studied my face for a long moment. "No, Harold. You seem like a man who's tired of being underestimated." We spent the next 2 hours going over the paperwork. Jonathan explained that he'd need to have the house appraised quickly, contact Sarah Chen to see if she was interested and qualified for a mortgage, and ensure that all the legal requirements were met. It would be tight, but it was possible. "One more thing," I said as I prepared to leave. "I don't want my children to know about this until after I'm settled at Willowbrook. I want it to be a surprise." Jonathan smiled. "I think I can arrange that." The next morning, Sarah Chen called me. Her voice was trembling with excitement and disbelief. "Mr. Whitman," she said, "Mr. Mills called me yesterday. He said you want to sell me your house. I don't understand why you would do this for me." "Sarah," I said, settling back into my armchair, "let me ask you something. When you see me in the grocery store, what do you see?" There was a pause. "I see a nice man who always says please and thank you. I see someone who asks about my daughter's school play and remembers that she's learning to play the violin. I see someone who treats me like a human being." "Exactly," I said. You see me, not dollar signs, not an inconvenience, not a burden. You see me. But Mr. Whitman, I can't afford to pay what the house is worth. Mr. Mills said you're asking fair market value. Sarah, I have faith in you. If Mr. Mills says you qualify for the mortgage, then you qualify. And if you're worried about the down payment, well, let's just say that the house comes with some furnishings that might help offset the cost. I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. Mr. Whitman, I don't know what to say. Say you'll take care of the house, I said. Say you'll let your daughter play in the backyard. Say you'll water the tomatoes. I will, she whispered. I promise I will. The paperwork was finalized on a Thursday. Jonathan had worked miracles, expediting the appraisal, fast-tracking the mortgage approval, and ensuring that all the legal requirements were met. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Sarah Chen was the legal owner of 1247 Maple Street. I spent that evening packing the few personal items I wanted to keep, a photograph of Eleanor on our wedding day, a small wooden box containing letters she'd written to me during my deployment in Vietnam, a leather journal where I'd recorded 40 years of garden notes, a few books that had been particular favorites. Everything else I left for Sarah, the furniture Eleanor and I had chosen together, the dishes we'd eaten from for decades, the tools I'd used to maintain the house and garden, the small television in the living room, the pots and pans in the kitchen, all of it. I wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter. Sarah, this house has been filled with love for 50 years. I hope you and your daughter will fill it with love for 50 more. The tomatoes need water every other day. The front steps creak on the third board from the top. The furnace filter needs to be changed in October. Welcome home, Harold. Friday morning came too soon. Margaret and David arrived with a van and 2 men they'd hired to help with the move. They were efficient, businesslike, checking items off their list and making sure everything was properly labeled. Are you ready, Dad? Margaret asked, her voice artificially bright. I looked around the house one last time. The walls still bore the faint outlines where family photos had hung. The hardwood floors showed the wear patterns of decades of daily life. The kitchen window framed the view of the garden I'd tended for so many years. Yes, I said. I'm ready. The ride to Willowbrook was quiet. I sat in the back seat of David's car, watching the familiar neighborhood scroll past. Margaret had tried to make conversation at first, pointing out landmarks and chattering about how nice the nursing home was going to be. But I wasn't in the mood for small talk, and eventually she gave up. The nursing home was exactly what I'd expected. Clean, sterile, filled with the kind of institutional furniture that was built to last, but never to comfort. My room was small but adequate, with a window that looked out onto a courtyard where a few residents sat in wheelchairs, staring at nothing. Well, David said, setting my suitcase on the narrow bed, I think you'll be comfortable here. Margaret was already unpacking my clothes, hanging them in the small closet. The staff seems very nice, she said. And look, there's a television. You can watch your game shows. I sat in the chair by the window and watched them bustle around, arranging my few possessions, checking with the nurses, making sure I was properly registered and accounted for. They were relieved, I could tell. Relieved that they'd successfully transferred the burden of my care to someone else. Relieved that they could get on with their lives without worrying about their aging father. We'll come visit you soon, Margaret said, bending down to kiss my forehead. It was the first time she'd touched me in months. Take care of yourself, Dad, David said, shaking my hand formally. And then they were gone. No lingering goodbye, no promises to call, no expressions of love or regret. Just the soft sound of the door closing behind them, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the antiseptic smell of institutional care. I sat by the window for a long time that first night, watching the shadows lengthen across the courtyard. Other residents wandered the halls, some with family members, others alone. The staff was kind but busy, checking on medications, monitoring vital signs, maintaining the efficient routine that kept places like this running smoothly. But I wasn't sad. I wasn't even particularly angry anymore. I was satisfied. I was content. I was, for the first time in months, at peace, because I knew something my children didn't know. I knew that tomorrow morning they would drive back to 1247 Maple Street, expecting to find an empty house ready for the real estate market. I knew they would walk up the front steps, past the rose bushes Eleanor had planted 20 years ago, and unlock the door with the spare key I'd given them. And I knew what they would find. Saturday morning came grey and drizzly. I was sitting in the common room pretending to watch television with a few other residents when my cell phone rang. The caller ID showed Margaret's number. "Dad," she said, her voice tight with confusion and something that might have been panic. "Dad, there are people in your house." I kept my voice level, curious. "People in my house. There's a woman and a little girl. They're living there. They have furniture. They act like they belong there." "How strange," I said. "Dad, did you give someone permission to stay in the house?" "Margaret, I'm an old man with dementia, remember? How could I give anyone permission to do anything?" There was a pause. I could hear David's voice in the background, sharp and agitated. "Dad, we need you to tell these people to leave. We need to get the house ready to sell." "I don't think I understand," I said. "If there are people in the house, perhaps you should call the police." "We tried that," Margaret said. "The police said the woman has a deed. She says she bought the house legally. Dad, what's going on?" I smiled at the television screen where a cheerful host was explaining the rules of a game show. "I'm not sure I follow you, dear." "Dad." David's voice came on the line. He'd taken the phone from Margaret. "Dad, this is important. Did you sell the house?" "David, I'm in a nursing home." "When would I have sold the house?" "Before you came here." "Did you sell the house before you came here?" I let the silence stretch out for a moment. Around me, other residents were absorbed in their own activities. Mrs. Patterson was working on a crossword puzzle. Mr. Rodriguez was reading a newspaper. The television droned on about prizes and contestants and the exciting world of daytime entertainment. "Dad, are you there?" "I'm here, David." "Did you sell the house?" I took a deep breath. "Yes." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could picture them, standing in the driveway of the house they'd expected to inherit, staring at the windows where Sarah Chen's curtains now hung. "You sold it." Margaret's voice was back on the line, flat and disbelieving. "You sold our house." "It was never your house, Margaret. It was my house, the house I built with my hands, the house I paid for with my labor, the house where I raised you and loved you and watched you grow up." "But, Dad, we need that money for your care. We need to pay for the nursing home." "The nursing home is paid for," I said. "The sale of the house generated enough money to cover my expenses for the rest of my life. Whatever's left over will go to charity." "Charity?" David's voice cracked. "Dad, we're your children. We're your family." "Are you?" I asked quietly. "Because family doesn't abandon each other. Family doesn't treat each other like burdens. Family doesn't count their inheritance before their parents are in the ground." "Dad, that's not fair. We were trying to help you." "You were trying to help yourselves. You saw an old man who was inconvenient and a house that was valuable. You made your choice." "Who did you sell it to?" Margaret asked. "Who is this woman?" "Her name is Sarah Chen. She's a single mother who works 2 jobs to support her daughter. She's been saving for years to buy a house in a good neighborhood where her child can go to good schools. She treats people with respect. She understands what family means." "A stranger," David said. "You sold our family home to a stranger." "No," I said. "I sold it to someone who still knows how to treat people like human beings." Someone who won't see me as a burden or an inconvenience. Someone who will take care of the house and love it the way it deserves to be loved. There was another long silence. I could hear traffic in the background, the sound of the city going about its business while my children processed the reality of what I'd done. "Dad," Margaret said finally, "how could you do this to us?" "How could I do this to you?" I repeated. "Margaret, let me ask you something. When you brought me here, when you packed up my belongings and signed the papers to put me in this place, did you hug me goodbye?" "What?" "Did you hug me? Did you tell me you loved me? Did you promise to visit? Did you treat me like a father who had spent his life caring for you, or did you treat me like a problem that needed to be solved?" The silence stretched out again. I knew the answer, and they knew I knew. "You left me here like I was nothing," I continued. "No hug, no goodbye, just the sound of the door closing behind you. You were so relieved to be rid of me that you couldn't even pretend to be sad. And now you're angry because I gave my house to someone who still knows what family means." "Dad, please," Margaret said, and I could hear tears in her voice. "Please don't do this. We can fix this. We can make things right." "Can you?" I asked. "Can you give me back the years I spent building that house? Can you give me back the pride I took in being independent? Can you give me back the respect I earned by working hard and loving my family and being a good man?" "Dad, we're sorry. We're so sorry." "I know you are," I said. "You're sorry that you won't be inheriting $800,000. You're sorry that your financial plans have been disrupted. You're sorry that you underestimated your old, confused father." "No, that's not true," David said. "We love you, Dad. We were trying to do what was best for you." "If you loved me," I said, "you would have talked to me about your concerns instead of making decisions for me. If you loved me, you would have looked for solutions that didn't require putting me in a nursing home. If you loved me, you would have treated me like a person whose opinions and feelings mattered." I paused, watching the rain streak down the common room windows. "But you didn't love me. You pitied me. You saw me as weak and confused and incapable of making my own decisions. You saw me as a burden and an inconvenience, and that's exactly how you treated me." "Dad, what do you want us to do?" Margaret asked. "What do you want us to say?" "I want you to understand that actions have consequences," I said. "I want you to understand that when you treat people like they don't matter, sometimes they find ways to show you that they do. I want you to understand that I may be old, but I'm not powerless." "So what happens now?" David asked. "Now you live with the choices you made. Now you learn that your father was not the confused old man you thought he was. Now you think about what it means to be a family." "And what about us?" Margaret asked. "What about our relationship?" I considered this question for a long moment. Outside, the rain had stopped, and a few residents were making their way to the courtyard for their afternoon walk. Mrs. Patterson had finished her crossword puzzle and was starting a new one. Mr. Rodriguez had fallen asleep in his chair, his newspaper spread across his chest. "That depends," I said finally. "Do you want a relationship with your father, or do you want a relationship with your inheritance?" "Dad, please." "I'm going to hang up now," I said. "I'm going to have lunch, and then I'm going to sit in the garden and think about the tomatoes I planted last spring. I'm going to think about Sarah Chen and her daughter, and how they're probably exploring their new home right now. I'm going to think about how sometimes the best thing you can do for the people you love is to show them what love actually looks like." "Dad, wait. If you want to visit me," I said, "you're welcome to come. But if you come as my children, not as my heirs. Come because you want to spend time with me, not because you want to discuss my financial decisions. Come because you love me, not because you want something from me." "Dad, we do love you." "Then show me," I said. "Show me what love looks like. Show me that you understand what family means. Show me that you see me as a person, not a problem." I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair. Around me, life at Willowbrook continued its quiet rhythm. Nurses checked on patients. Visitors came and went. The television played its endless stream of programs designed to distract and comfort. But I wasn't distracted. I wasn't in need of comfort. I was satisfied. I was proud. I was, for the first time in months, completely and utterly content. 3 hours later, my phone rang again. This time it was Sarah Chen. "Mr. Whitman," she said, her voice warm with gratitude and wonder. "I'm calling from our new home, from your beautiful home. Amy and I just finished unpacking, and we wanted to thank you again." "How is everything?" I asked. "It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. The furniture is beautiful, and the kitchen is bigger than any kitchen I've ever had. Amy found the swing in the backyard. Did you build that?" "I built it for my children 40 years ago," I said. "I hope Amy enjoys it. She's on it right now. She says it's the best swing in the world." Sarah paused. "Mr. Whitman, I found your note. About the tomatoes and the furnace and the creaky step. It made me cry. Happy tears, I hope. Very happy tears. And I have a question for you." "What's that?" "Would you like to come visit us sometime? I know you're at Willowbrook, but maybe on a nice day you could come see the house, see how we're settling in. Amy would love to meet you, and I could show you how well the tomatoes are doing." I felt something warm and bright bloom in my chest. "I would like that very much." "Good. I'll call you next week, and we'll arrange something. And Mr. Whitman, thank you. Thank you for seeing us. Thank you for giving us a home. Thank you for showing us that there are still good people in the world." After I hung up, I sat in the common room until dinner time, thinking about families and homes and the different ways people show love. I thought about the house I'd built with my hands, now filled with the laughter of a child who would swing on the swing I'd made decades ago. I thought about Sarah Chen, who worked 2 jobs and saved every penny to give her daughter a better life. And I thought about Margaret and David, who were probably sitting in their expensive cars outside 1247 Maple Street, trying to figure out how their carefully laid plans had gone so wrong. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through my window. It was Sunday, and the nursing home was quieter than usual. I dressed carefully and made my way to the dining room for breakfast, where I found Mrs. Patterson struggling with her scrambled eggs. "Would you like some help?" I asked. She looked up at me with grateful eyes. "That would be wonderful, dear. My arthritis is acting up today." I cut her eggs into smaller pieces and buttered her toast. "There you go." "Thank you," she said. "You're very kind. I'm Helen, by the way. Helen Patterson." "Harold Whitman," I said. "Nice to meet you, Helen." "Harold? You seem different from the other residents. Less defeated, if you don't mind my saying so." I smiled. "I don't mind at all. I suppose I don't feel defeated. Most people who end up in places like this feel like their lives are over, like they've lost everything that mattered." "Have you lost everything that mattered, Helen?" She considered this question while chewing her toast. I thought I had. My husband died 5 years ago. My son lives in California and calls once a month. My daughter lives 20 minutes away but visits twice a year. I felt like I was just waiting. And now? Now I'm thinking maybe I was waiting for the wrong things. Maybe I was waiting for other people to make my life meaningful instead of finding ways to make it meaningful myself. I nodded. "That's a very wise observation. What about you, Harold? What are you waiting for?" I looked around the dining room, at the other residents quietly eating their breakfast, at the staff members going about their duties with professional kindness, at the institutional artwork on the walls that was meant to be cheerful but somehow missed the mark. "I'm not waiting for anything," I said. "I'm just living." Just living? Just living. One day at a time, one small act of kindness at a time, one moment of connection at a time. Helen smiled. "I think I'd like to try that." Later that day, I was sitting in the garden when a young woman approached me. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, and she had a little girl with her who looked to be about 8 years old. "Mr. Whitman," the woman said, "I'm Sarah Chen, and this is my daughter Amy." I stood up slowly, my heart full of joy. Sarah. Amy. I'm so happy to meet you. Amy stepped forward shyly. Mr. Whitman, thank you for letting us live in your house. It's the most beautiful house in the world. I'm glad you like it, sweetheart. Are you taking good care of it? Oh, yes, Amy said, her shyness forgotten in her enthusiasm. I water the tomatoes every day, and I've been practicing my violin in the living room because Mama says the acoustics are perfect, and the swing in the backyard is amazing. I can swing so high I can see over the fence. Sarah put her hand on her daughter's shoulder. Amy, why don't you go see if there are any other children in the garden? I'd like to talk to Mr. Whitman for a few minutes. Amy nodded and skipped away, her curiosity about the nursing home overcoming any reservations she might have had. Mr. Whitman, Sarah said, sitting down on the bench beside me, I wanted to tell you something. Yesterday, 2 people came to the house. They said they were your children. They seemed very upset. I imagine they were. They wanted to know how I'd gotten the house. They seemed to think there had been some kind of mistake. What did you tell them? I told them the truth, that I'd bought the house legally through a lawyer, from you, that all the paperwork was in order, that you'd been very generous to sell it to me at a fair price when you could have gotten much more from other buyers. And how did they react? Sarah was quiet for a moment. They were angry. They said things about you that, well, that weren't very nice. They seemed to think you weren't capable of making your own decisions. I see. But Mr. Whitman, I've been thinking about this since yesterday, about why you chose to sell the house to me instead of to them. And I think I understand. Do you? I think you wanted to give the house to someone who would love it the way you loved it. Someone who would see it as a home, not as an investment. Someone who would take care of it and fill it with happiness. Indeed, I looked at this remarkable woman, this single mother who worked 2 jobs and saved every penny to give her daughter a better life, and I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. You're absolutely right, I said. I also think, Sarah continued, that you wanted to teach your children a lesson about how they were treating you, about respect and family and what really matters. That's also true. And I think you wanted to show them that you weren't weak or confused or incapable, that you were still the same strong, intelligent man who built that house with his own hands. Sarah, I said, you are a very perceptive woman. I have to be, she said. When you're raising a child on your own, you learn to read people pretty quickly. You learn to tell the difference between people who genuinely care about you and people who want something from you. Amy came running back, having found a small group of children who were visiting their grandparents. Mama, can I stay and play for a few more minutes? Of course, sweetheart, but don't wander off. Amy ran back to her new friends, and Sarah turned to me again. Mr. Whitman, I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? I'd like you to come have dinner with us next Sunday at the house. I want to cook for you in the kitchen you designed. I want Amy to play the violin for you in the living room with the perfect acoustics. I want you to see how we're taking care of your home. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. I would love that more than anything. Good. I'll pick you up at 5 o'clock. Sarah, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you really think the house has perfect acoustics for violin? She laughed. I have no idea. But Amy thinks it does, and that's what matters. She's been practicing twice as much since we moved in because she says the house makes her music sound beautiful. The house has good ears, I said. It's been listening to music for 50 years. That evening I called Jonathan Mills. Harold, he said, I've been expecting your call. I assume your children have discovered the change in ownership? They have, and they're not pleased. I can imagine. Have they contacted you? They called yesterday. They were upset. Are you having second thoughts? Not at all. Jonathan, I want to thank you for helping me with this. I know it was complicated, and I know you had to work fast. It was my pleasure, Harold. I have to say, I admire what you did. It took courage. It took desperation, I said. But I'm glad I did it. How are you settling in at Willowbrook? Better than I expected. I'm making friends. I'm finding ways to be useful. I'm learning that my life isn't over just because I'm in a nursing home. That's wonderful to hear. And Harold, your children may come around eventually. Sometimes people need time to process their mistakes. Maybe, I said. But if they don't, I'll be okay. I have Sarah and Amy now. I have new friends here. I have a life that's mine, not one that someone else has planned for me. You're a remarkable man, Harold Whitman. I'm just a man who refused to be invisible. Over the next few weeks, I settled into the rhythm of life at Willowbrook. I helped Helen Patterson with her meals and listened to her stories about her late husband. I played checkers with Mr. Rodriguez and learned about his career as a high school math teacher. I started a small garden in the courtyard, teaching other residents how to grow herbs and vegetables in containers. The staff began to see me differently. Instead of just another elderly resident to be managed and monitored, I became someone who contributed to the community. I helped new residents adjust to their surroundings. I mediated disputes between roommates. I organized activities and encouraged social interaction. Margaret and David called twice more, each time trying to convince me to reverse the sale of the house. Each time, I told them the same thing. The house was no longer mine to give them, and their relationship with me didn't depend on my financial decisions. "But Dad," Margaret said during the third call, "don't you want to leave something for your grandchildren?" It was the first time she'd mentioned my grandchildren in months. "Tell me about them," I said. "What?" "My grandchildren. Tell me about them. What are their names? What grades are they in? What do they like to do?" There was a long pause. "Dad, you know their names. Humor me." "Well, there's Jessica. She's David's daughter. She's 15. And she's a good student. She likes music." "What kind of music?" "I don't know. Teenage music." "Does she play an instrument? Does she sing? Does she write songs?" Another pause. "I think she plays guitar." "You think? Dad, what's your point?" "My point is that you're asking me to leave something for grandchildren you don't really know. You're asking me to preserve an inheritance for children you rarely see, children whose interests and dreams you can't even describe to me. That's not fair. Isn't it? Margaret, when was the last time you brought Jessica to see me? When was the last time any of you brought the grandchildren for a visit?" Silence. "I'll tell you when," I continued. "It was Christmas 2 years ago. Jessica was 13 then, and she spent the entire visit texting on her phone. She didn't say 10 words to me. And you know what? I don't blame her. Why should she be interested in a grandfather she barely knows? Dad, we've been busy. Too busy to maintain relationships with the people who love you. Too busy to teach your children about their family history. Too busy to create the kinds of memories that matter. So, you're punishing us." "No, Margaret. I'm teaching you. I'm showing you what happens when you treat people like they don't matter. I'm showing you that love is not something you can take for granted." "And Sarah Chen? What about her? You barely know her." "I know that she treats people with respect. I know that she's teaching her daughter about kindness and gratitude. I know that she sees me as a person, not as a wallet with legs." "Dad, please, can't we work something out?" "Margaret, do you love me?" "Of course I love you." "Then prove it. Come visit me, not to talk about money or inheritances or the house. Come visit me because you want to spend time with your father. Bring Jessica, bring David's boys. Let me get to know my grandchildren while I still can." We'll come visit." "When?" "Soon, I promise." "Margaret, I'm 78 years old. I'm living in a nursing home. I don't have time for soon. I have time for now." "Okay, this weekend. We'll come this weekend." "All of you?" "Yes, all of us." "Good. I'll look forward to it." But they didn't come that weekend. or the next, or the one after that. Instead, Sarah and Amy came for dinner as planned, picking me up in Sarah's modest sedan and driving me back to the house I'd built with my own hands. Walking through the front door was like stepping back in time, but also like stepping into a completely different world. The house was the same, but it was also transformed. Sarah had added small touches that made it feel warm and lived in. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table, children's artwork on the refrigerator, a violin case in the corner of the living room, books scattered on the coffee table. "It feels like a home again," I said, running my hand along the banister I'd sanded and stained myself 40 years ago. "It always was a home," Sarah said. "We're just the new family living in it." Amy took my hand and led me on a tour, pointing out all the things she loved about the house. The window seat in her bedroom where she liked to read, the kitchen where she helped her mother cook, the basement where they'd set up a small workshop for craft projects. "And look," Amy said, opening the back door, "the tomatoes are growing so well. I've been talking to them like you said in your note." "You talk to them?" "Every day. I tell them about school and about my violin lessons and about how happy we are to live here. Mama says plants grow better when they know they're loved." I looked at the garden I'd tended for decades, now thriving under the care of an 8-year-old girl who talked to tomatoes, and I felt a deep sense of continuity, of life continuing in the best possible way. Dinner was simple but perfect. Sarah had made pot roast with vegetables, and Amy had baked cookies for dessert. We sat at the kitchen table, where Eleanor and I had shared thousands of meals, where we'd helped our children with homework and planned family vacations and discussed the day's events. "Mr. Whitman," Amy said, taking a bite of her cookie, "will you tell me about when you built this house?" So I told her about the young man I'd been, fresh out of the army, newly married to the love of my life. I told her about how Eleanor and I had saved every penny for the down payment, how we'd lived in a tiny apartment for 2 years while we planned and dreamed and saved. "I did most of the work myself," I said. "Back then, I was strong and stubborn and convinced I could do anything. It took me 3 years to finish everything, working evenings and weekends." "Did you ever get discouraged?" Amy asked. "Many times. There were nights when I'd come home from my regular job, exhausted, and the last thing I wanted to do was work on the house. But your mother, Eleanor, she would make me dinner and sit with me while I ate, and she'd talk about how we were going to decorate each room, how we were going to plant a garden, how we were going to raise our children here." "She sounds wonderful," Sarah said. "She was. She was the best person I ever knew. She made me better than I would have been on my own." "Is that why you wanted us to have the house?" Amy asked. "Because you thought we would love it like you and Eleanor did?" "Partly," I said, "but mostly because I could see that you understood what a home really is. It's not just a building or an investment. It's a place where people love each other, where they build memories, where they feel safe and happy." After dinner, Amy played violin for me in the living room. She was still learning, and her technique wasn't perfect, but she played with such joy and concentration that I was moved to tears. When she finished, she looked at me expectantly. "That was beautiful," I said. "The house hasn't heard music like that in a long time." "Really? You really liked it?" "I loved it, and I can tell the house loved it too. Can you hear how the acoustics made your music sound fuller and richer?" Amy nodded eagerly. "It's like the house is helping me play better." "The house has good ears," I said. "It's been listening to music for 50 years, and it knows how to make beautiful sounds even more beautiful." When Sarah drove me back to Willowbrook that evening, I felt more content than I had in months. The house was in good hands. More than that, it was being loved and appreciated and filled with the kind of happiness that Eleanor and I had always dreamed of. "Thank you," I said, as we pulled into the nursing home parking lot. "Thank you for giving me the chance to see the house again. Thank you for taking such good care of it." "Thank you for trusting us with it," Sarah said. Amy and I will never forget what you've done for us." "And Mr. Whitman?" Amy said from the back seat. "Will you come have dinner with us again next month?" "I would love that," I said, "but only if you promise to keep practicing your violin." "I promise." As I walked back into Willowbrook, I felt like I was walking into a different place than the one I'd left that morning. It wasn't just a nursing home anymore. It was a place where I lived, where I had friends, where I had a role to play in the community. "How was your dinner?" Helen Patterson asked as I passed the common room. "It was perfect," I said. "Absolutely perfect." "You look happy, Harold. Really happy." "I am happy, Helen. I'm happier than I've been in a long time." "That's wonderful. I'm glad you found your way back to happiness." I stopped and looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean that when you first came here, you seemed like a man who had lost everything. Now you seem like a man who has found something new." "I have found something new. I've found that my life isn't over just because it's different. I've found that I can still make choices that matter. I've found that I can still be useful and valued and loved." "How did you find all that?" "I stopped waiting for other people to give me a life worth living, and I started creating one for myself." Helen smiled. "I think I'd like to try that." "I think you should, and I think I'd like to help you, if you'll let me." Over the following weeks, I began to understand that my story wasn't just about a house or money, or even about teaching my children a lesson. It was about dignity. It was about refusing to be invisible. It was about claiming the right to make my own choices, even when other people thought I was too old or too confused to know what was best for me. I started a support group for residents who were struggling with the transition to nursing home life. I partnered with the activities director to create programs that allowed residents to share their skills and knowledge with each other. I wrote letters to the local newspaper about the importance of treating elderly people with respect and dignity. Most importantly, I continued to build relationships with Sarah and Amy, who visited me regularly and had become like family to me, with the staff at Willowbrook, who began to see me as a partner rather than just a patient, with my fellow residents, who looked to me for guidance and friendship, and eventually with Margaret and David. It took 6 weeks, but they finally came to visit. They arrived on a Thursday afternoon, both looking uncomfortable and uncertain. Margaret was carrying a small bouquet of flowers. David had brought a box of chocolates. "Dad," Margaret said, settling into the chair beside my bed, "how are you feeling?" "I'm feeling good," I said. "How are you?" We're fine. We brought you some things." "Thank you, that was thoughtful." We sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. Finally, David cleared his throat. "Dad, we've been thinking about what you said, about family and respect and all that. And we think maybe we made some mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" Margaret leaned forward. "We made assumptions about what you wanted. We made decisions for you instead of with you. We treated you like you were incapable of knowing what was best for yourself. And we're sorry," David said. "We're really sorry." I looked at my children, these middle-aged adults who had once been the center of my world, and I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Love, certainly. Disappointment. Sadness. But also hope. "I appreciate your apology," I said, "but I need you to understand something. I'm not angry about the house. I'm not angry about the nursing home. I'm angry about the way you treated me. I'm angry about the assumptions you made about my mental capacity and my ability to make my own decisions." "We understand," Margaret said. "We were wrong." "Were you? Or are you just saying that because you're upset about losing your inheritance?" David flinched. "Dad, it's not about the money, isn't it? If I hadn't sold the house, would you be here apologizing to me? That's not fair. Neither is being treated like a burden by your own children." We sat in silence again. I could see them struggling with the reality of what I'd said, trying to reconcile their view of themselves as loving children with their actions over the past few months. "Dad," Margaret said finally, "what can we do to fix this? You can start by telling me about my grandchildren, not their names or their ages, but who they are, what they care about, what makes them happy, what challenges they're facing. Jessica she's struggling in school, David said hesitantly. She's smart, but she's not applying herself. She spends all her time on her phone or playing guitar. She plays guitar. Yeah, she's actually pretty good. She writes her own songs. What kind of songs? I don't know. She doesn't really share them with us. Why not? David looked uncomfortable. We've been pretty critical of her music. We think she should focus more on her studies. And what does Jessica think? She thinks we don't understand her. She thinks we don't support her dreams. I nodded. And your boys, Margaret? Tell me about them. Michael is 8. He's a lot like you, actually. He loves to build things. He's always asking for tools and wood and permission to make projects in the garage. And you let him. Sometimes. But it's so messy, and we worry about safety. What about your younger son? Tommy is 5. He's a little different. He has some learning challenges. He's in special education, and it's been hard on all of us. Hard how? Hard to accept that he might not be able to do all the things we dreamed of for him. Hard to know how to help him. Hard to explain to other people why he's different. I felt a pang of sadness for this grandson I barely knew, a little boy who needed his family's support and understanding more than anything else in the world. Margaret, I said, do you remember when you were 5 years old and you decided you wanted to be a veterinarian? Yes. Do you remember how I reacted? You bought me a stethoscope and let me practice on the dog. And when you were 8 and wanted to be a ballerina? You built me a ballet bar in the basement, and when you were 15 and wanted to quit school to become a rock star. Margaret smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. You sat me down and helped me figure out a way to pursue music while still getting my education. You never told me my dreams were stupid. And David, do you remember when you were 12 and wanted to be a professional baseball player? You coached my little league team for 3 years, even though you knew nothing about baseball. And when you were 16 and wanted to build a motorcycle in the garage, you helped me research engine repair and found a used bike I could work on. So tell me, I said, why are you not giving your children the same support and encouragement that I gave you? They looked at each other, and I could see the recognition dawning in their eyes. Because, Margaret said slowly, we've been so focused on protecting them from disappointment that we've forgotten to nurture their dreams. And because, David added, we've been so worried about their futures that we've forgotten to appreciate who they are right now. Exactly, I said. And that's the same mistake you made with me. You were so focused on protecting me from imaginary dangers that you forgot to consider what I actually wanted and needed. So what do we do now? Margaret asked. Now, you start over. You apologize to Jessica for not supporting her music. You encourage Michael's building projects. You learn everything you can about Tommy's learning challenges and help him succeed in his own way. And what about us? David asked. What about our relationship with you? That depends on you, I said. Do you want a relationship with me, or do you want to keep treating me like a problem to be managed? We want a relationship with you, Margaret said. A real relationship. Then you need to start seeing me as a person, not as your elderly father who needs to be protected from himself. You need to respect my decisions, even when you don't understand them. You need to include me in your lives, not just when it's convenient. How do we do that? You start by bringing your children to visit me, not just once, but regularly. You let Jessica play her guitar for me. You let Michael help me with projects in the courtyard garden. You let Tommy be himself, without apologies or explanations. And what about the house? David asked. Are you sure there's no way to... David, I said firmly, the house is gone. It belongs to Sarah and Amy now, and they're taking beautiful care of it. That chapter of our lives is closed. But Dad, we grew up in that house. We have so many memories there. And those memories are still yours. No one can take them away from you. But the house itself was never yours to inherit. It was mine to do with as I chose. So what do we inherit? Margaret asked. You inherit the values your mother and I tried to teach you. You inherit the love we gave you, even when you didn't deserve it. You inherit the responsibility to be better parents to your children than you were children to me. They sat with this for a long time, processing the weight of what I'd said. Dad, Margaret said finally, we'd like to bring the kids to visit you next weekend. Would that be okay? I would love that more than anything. And Dad, David added, would you tell us more about the woman who bought the house, Sarah? So I told them about Sarah Chen, about her work ethic and her kindness, about the way she treated me with respect and dignity. I told them about Amy, about her violin playing, and her conversations with the tomatoes, and her joy in having a home with a backyard swing. She sounds wonderful, Margaret said when I finished. She is. She's the kind of person who makes the world better just by being in it. And you chose her over us. I chose her over your greed and your assumptions, and your willingness to treat me like I was invisible. I chose her because she saw me as a person worth knowing, not just as a source of inheritance. We see you as a person worth knowing, David said. Do you? Then prove it. Come visit me because you want to spend time with me, not because you want something from me. Bring your children and let them get to know their grandfather. Share your lives with me. Ask for my advice, value my opinions. We will, Margaret said. We promise. Don't promise, I said. Just do it. The following weekend they kept their word. Margaret arrived with Jessica, who was indeed a talented 15-year-old guitarist. She was shy at first, but when I asked her to play something for me, she lit up and performed 3 of her own compositions. They were beautiful, heartfelt songs about growing up and finding your place in the world. Jessica, I said when she finished, you have a real gift. Have you thought about pursuing music seriously? I want to, she said, but Mom and Dad think I should focus on more practical things. What do you think? I think music is the most important thing in my life. I think about it all the time. I dream about it. I can't imagine doing anything else. I looked at David, who was listening to his daughter with an expression of surprise and pride. David, I said, what do you think about supporting Jessica's musical education? I never realized how passionate she was about it. I never really listened to her play before. And now that you have. Now I think maybe we should look into music schools, maybe find her a better teacher. Jessica's face lit up with joy and disbelief. Really, Dad? You'd do that? If it's what you really want, then yes, I want to support your dreams. Michael, Margaret's 8-year-old son, was fascinated by the courtyard garden I'd started. He wanted to know how everything worked, why certain plants grew better in certain spots, how to tell when vegetables were ready to harvest. Grandpa, he said, could you teach me how to build a garden at our house? I'd love to, but you'll have to convince your mother to let you dig up part of the yard. Mom, can we please build a garden, please? Margaret looked at her son's eager face and smiled. I suppose we could turn that patch of grass behind the shed into a vegetable garden. Yes, Grandpa, will you help me plan it? Of course, we'll draw up blueprints and make a list of everything we need. Tommy, the 5-year-old with learning challenges, was quieter than his brother, but he was drawn to the art supplies I'd started keeping in my room. He spent an hour making a drawing of the courtyard garden, carefully coloring each flower and vegetable with intense concentration. Tommy, I said, this is a beautiful picture. You're a very talented artist. I like colors, he said simply. I can see that. Would you like to make more pictures for me? Yes. Can I come back next week? I hope you will. I hope all of you will. As they were preparing to leave, Margaret pulled me aside. Dad, she said, I owe you an apology. Not just for the house, but for everything. for not seeing how much you still had to offer, for not recognizing how much the kids needed their grandfather in their lives. I accept your apology, I said, but more importantly, I'm proud of you for seeing it now. I have a question, though. Why did you choose Sarah over us? What did she do that made you trust her with something so important? I thought about this for a moment. She saw me, Margaret. When I went to the grocery store, she didn't just see an old man in her checkout line. She saw Harold Whitman, a person with a history and feelings and opinions that mattered. She asked about my garden because she cared about the answer, not because she was being polite. And we didn't see you. You saw an aging parent who was becoming a burden. You saw a house that would be valuable to sell. You saw problems that needed to be solved, but you didn't see me. Margaret nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, I said. Be better. Be the kind of parent to your children that you want them to be to you when you're old. I will, I promise. As I watched them drive away, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because I had gotten revenge on my children, but because I had helped them become better people. Because I had shown them that love is not something you can take for granted. That relationships require effort and attention and respect. Over the following months, my relationship with Margaret and David slowly improved. They visited regularly, bringing the grandchildren and sharing their lives with me. Jessica started taking advanced music classes and even performed at a local coffee shop. Michael and I designed and built a garden in Margaret's backyard, complete with raised beds and a small greenhouse. Tommy continued making art, and we discovered that he had an exceptional eye for color and composition. Sarah and Amy continued to be regular visitors as well, updating me on their lives and the house. Amy's violin playing improved dramatically, and she started participating in school concerts. Sarah got a promotion at work and was able to reduce her hours at her second job. Mr. Whitman, Amy said during one of their visits, I want to show you something. She led me to the piano in Willowbrook's common room and played a simple melody I didn't recognize. What was that? I asked. It's a song I wrote for you. I call it The House That Love Built. I felt tears in my eyes. It's beautiful, Amy, absolutely beautiful. I wrote it because I wanted you to know that the house isn't just a building. It's all the love you put into it, and all the love we're putting into it now. It's like the love keeps growing and growing, even when people move away. That's exactly right, I said. Love doesn't disappear when circumstances change. It just finds new ways to express itself. Is that why you gave us the house? Because you knew we would love it like you did? Partly, but also because I knew that giving it to you would help me learn something important about myself. What did you learn? I learned that I was still capable of making choices that mattered. I learned that I could still impact other people's lives in positive ways. I learned that I wasn't powerless, even when other people thought I was. And what about your real children, the ones who put you here? They're learning too. They're learning that love isn't something you can take for granted. They're learning that relationships require effort and attention. They're learning that everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their age or circumstances. Do you forgive them? I forgive them because I love them. But more importantly, I'm proud of them for being willing to learn and grow and change. 6 months after I'd been admitted to Willowbrook, I received an unexpected visitor. It was a young man in his 20s, nicely dressed, carrying a briefcase. Mr. Whitman, he said, my name is James Chen. I'm Sarah's nephew. I'm a lawyer, and I wanted to thank you for what you did for my aunt and cousin. There's no need to thank me, James. I did what I thought was right. What you did was more than right. It was extraordinary. Sarah told me the whole story about how you chose to sell the house to her instead of leaving it to your children, about how you saw past her circumstances to who she really was as a person. Your aunt is a remarkable woman. She deserved a chance to give her daughter a good life. She is remarkable, and what you did for her, it's changed everything. Amy is thriving in her new school. Sarah is happier than I've seen her in years. They have stability and security for the first time in a long time. I'm glad to hear that, but that's not the only reason I'm here. I'm here because I wanted to tell you about something that's happened as a result of your generosity. What's that? Sarah's story has inspired other people. She's been sharing your story with friends and co-workers, and it started a movement of sorts. People are looking for ways to help single parents achieve home ownership. Local banks are creating special programs. Real estate agents are volunteering their services. That's wonderful. It's more than wonderful. It's transformative. You didn't just change one family's life. You started a ripple effect that's changing your entire community. I sat back in my chair, amazed by the unexpected consequences of my decision. I never imagined. Most people don't realize the impact they can have, but you do. You understood that even one person acting with courage and compassion can make a difference. James, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think I made the right choice, even though it hurt my children? Mr. Whitman, I think you made the only choice that was true to who you are. You chose love over greed. You chose dignity over convenience. You chose to see people as they really are instead of as what they could do for you. And my children, from what Sarah tells me, they're learning from your example. They're becoming better parents, better people. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to show people the consequences of their actions. That's what I hoped for, and that's what you achieved. After James left, I sat in my room thinking about legacy and impact and the ways that individual choices can echo through time. I thought about Sarah and Amy thriving in the house I'd built with my hands. I thought about Margaret and David, learning to be better parents to their children. I thought about the ripple effects that James had described, the ways that one act of kindness could inspire others. I realized that my story wasn't really about a house or money or even about family relationships. It was about the power of choice. It was about the fact that even when circumstances seem to limit our options, we always have the power to choose how we respond to those circumstances. I chose to refuse invisibility. I chose to assert my dignity and autonomy. I chose to give my home to people who would love it and care for it. I chose to teach my children a lesson about respect and family and what really matters in life. And in making those choices, I had discovered something profound about myself. I had discovered that I was still capable of making a difference in the world. I was still capable of acts of love and generosity and courage. I was still capable of growth and change and hope. That evening I called Sarah to check on her and Amy. "Mr. Whitman," Sarah said, "I'm so glad you called. Amy has been asking when you're coming for dinner again. I'd love to come any time you'll have me. How about this Sunday? I'm making your favorite pot roast." "That sounds perfect. And Mr. Whitman, I have some news. I've been accepted into a program to become a certified nursing assistant. If I complete the training, I'll be able to get a better job with benefits and more regular hours." "Sarah, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you." "I wouldn't be able to do it without the stability you've given us. Having a home, a real home, has made all the difference. You would have found a way regardless. You're the kind of person who makes things happen." "Maybe, but it's easier to make things happen when you have people who believe in you." "I do believe in you. I believe in you and Amy both. Thank you for everything, for seeing us, for trusting us, for giving us a chance. Thank you for giving an old man a chance to feel useful again." After we hung up, I sat by my window watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought about the day I'd been admitted to Willowbrook, angry and hurt and feeling like my life was over. I thought about how wrong I'd been. My life wasn't over. It was just different. It was still full of possibility and purpose and love. It was still mine to shape and direct and enjoy. I had learned that aging doesn't have to mean becoming invisible, that living in a nursing home doesn't have to mean giving up your autonomy, that the end of one chapter doesn't have to mean the end of the story. I had learned that love takes many forms, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to refuse to accept less than you deserve. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is exactly what everyone expects you not to do. I had learned that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about the people who see you and value you and treat you with respect and dignity. It's about the connections you choose to nurture and maintain. And I had learned that it's never too late to make a difference in the world. It's never too late to choose love over fear, courage over comfort, hope over despair. As I prepared for bed that night, I looked at the small collection of personal items I'd brought with me to Willowbrook. The photograph of Eleanor on our wedding day, the wooden box containing her letters, the leather journal filled with 40 years of garden notes, and I realized that these weren't just mementos of a life that was ending. They were foundations for a life that was continuing. They were reminders of who I had been and who I still was and who I could still become. I opened the journal to a fresh page and began to write, "Today I learned that giving away a house can be the most powerful thing a person can do, not because of the monetary value, but because of the love and hope and possibility it represents. I learned that sometimes the best way to teach people about love is to show them what it looks like in action." I paused, thinking about what else I wanted to record. Then I continued, "I learned that I am not invisible. I am not powerless. I'm not a burden. I'm Harold Whitman, and I still have stories to tell, love to give, and choices to make. I'm still here, still learning, still growing, still hoping." I closed the journal and placed it on my nightstand. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. Tomorrow I would continue building relationships and making choices and living my life with purpose and dignity. Tomorrow I would wake up in a nursing home, but I would wake up as myself. Harold Whitman, a man who had built a house with his hands and filled it with love, a man who had given that house to people who would cherish it, a man who had taught his children valuable lessons about respect and family and what really matters in life, a man who had refused to become invisible, and in the end that was the most important thing of all.